Welcome to the Global Roundtable. This series focuses on the future of economic competition in the 21st century. I'm Parag Khanna, author of How to Run the World. I'm joined by a very distinguished panel, including Dambisa Moyo, author of How the West Was Lost, Daniel Altman, author of Outrageous Fortunes, and Anand Giridharadas, author of India Calling. Well, we've all written books about the future of the global economy and prognosticated a bit about how it might look going forward. But the first thing we should ask is to step back and say, who's to blame here? How did really wind up in this situation?
Well, I think that's a fantastic question. The fact of the matter is that if you look back in the last 50 years, we really are fundamentally all to blame. Governments for setting inadequate policies, individuals and corporations for obviously excessive borrowing, and certainly the financial industry for approaching these situations through leverage and increasing the risks across the globe.
I think, though, that we have set a lot of bad goals for our decision makers, whether they're in government or in the private sector. We've got such a short-term outlook. We care about quarterly earnings. We care about elections every 2 years. How are we ever going to get people to make the decisions that will require investments for the long term, 10 or 20 years down the road, if they're focused on this very short-term decision-making cycle?
Just to build on what Dan said, if you look at, it's interesting to think about this as a cultural problem rather than just an economic problem. I mean, I'm amazed every time I turn on CNBC. I think the people the Carnegies and Rockefellers who actually built this country through corporate energy 100 years ago would be shocked to turn on CNBC today and see kind of the reduction of business to this kind of little video game of quarterly performing, whether you go a little bit higher or lower. And that short-term is Washington and politics in almost every sphere of life, and very clearly led to the crisis that we're talking about today.
So we've identified this as a cultural problem, as you just said, Anand. It's also an economic problem and a political problem. I think, though, we've come back to this conclusion that we have a global economic crisis, but still no global political institutions that can tie it all together. And so despite all of the interest that there is globally in participating in globalization, we still have tremendous shortcomings in making that system stable. Well, very interesting insights, and thanks very much for joining us. More on that and other relevant topics at bigthink.com.